Yes, so welcome back. So today we are going to be doing an interesting paper, Building Theories from Case Study Research by Kathleen Eisenhardt. So this paper is a very good one if your plan is to go into the organization and build theories to serve the organization. And with information systems is all about studying the organization and solving problems for the organization. And this is a very interesting time because the AI with AI now, being everything in the organization, and now we need more and more researchers to study the phenomenon AI presents. And if this is something you want to do, I want to understand how you can get into an organization and understand why are some AI products successful and why others are not. This is the right paper for you. And without further ado, let me go to the slides. Now, so welcome. So, I want you to think of this not just as a research method, but an architect's blueprint. And when an architect wants to build a new structure, they don't just start stacking bricks randomly. They need a rigorous plan to turn raw materials into a standing structure. And in research, we need a rigorous plan to turn raw data like interviews, observation into a solid scientific theory. So, going for the slide two, which I call the theory void. Now, the theory void, more like building in an uncharted ground. Now, we start with the problem. In the world of organizational research, our main job is to develop theories, as we all know. But often we find ourselves on uncharted grounds, and sometimes existing theories are inadequate. You see, the existing theories are inadequate because most of the theories we have before, cannot be used to study what is currently happening now. So, or they simply don't exist yet because the phenomenon is new. Now, case study research is, I think, is a powerful path forward here because it is inductive, which means we build the theory from the data we collect from the interviews and everything, as opposed to texting theories down, as opposed to a deductive method. But however, for a long time, this process felt like a black box, and we know that researchers went into organizations and came up with brilliant insights, but we didn't really have a clear map on how they did it because it often looked like more or less intuition as opposed to science. So today we are going to open that black box and look at the mechanism inside how these researchers went to these organizations and built wonderful theories. So without further ado, let's go to slide 3. Now, here Eisenhardt provided us with the missing map, a systematic 8 steps process. Now, as you look at this roadmap, keep in mind that this is an iterative process, and this means that it is not like a straight line from A to B, but we will move back and forth between these steps, and constantly we are going to be checking our ideas against the data. So, the goal here is to create a theory that is novel, something that is new and interesting, a theory that is testable, that can be proven wrong, and a theory that is empirically valid, actually match the real world data. So we'll start at the getting started, and let's check the slide 4. Now, you to start with, so laying the cornerstone. Every great building starts with a cornerstone. If you agree with me, and in research, this is step one, which is getting started. So the first thing we need is a research question. You know, before before you build a theory, you need a research question. And and to understand this, I want you to imagine that you are a detective, and you can't just, as a detective, you can't just walk into a city or into a town and say, I'm looking for clues. You know, you need a specific case that you want to work on. Like a sample case might be who robbed the bank. Now, if you don't have this case, or if you don't have this question, without this focus, you will be overwhelmed by the sheer amount of data you see. Now, however, there's a crucial balance here. You need to understand the crucial balance. Now, first of all, you have to avoid hypothesis. Now, we do not start with hypothesis like the butler did rob the bank. Because if you start with the hypothesis that the butler robbed the bank, uh, if we do that, we actually might miss the evidence that might point us to the fact that the gardener robbed the bank. So we want to keep our minds open, right? We want to keep our minds open and just not have a preconceived hypothesis. So number two is use a prior construct. If you're a researcher, you know what is a priori construct. It's come up with construct, uh, of what you are studying. And I think this is a fancy researcher's language for having a rough idea of what to measure. So for you to measure anything, you have to know the name or the construct of what you are trying to measure. For example, if you are studying companies conflict, you might decide ahead of time to look for constructs like shouting matches. You're you're measuring shouting matches, or budget dispute. So these are like constructs. So you actually know what you are measuring. These are the construct. So this gives you a firmer empirical grounding to start with. So the cornerstone focuses on our effort, but leaves us flexible enough to find surprises. So going to slide 5, choosing the site. This is also a very important one. Now, uh, first of all, you can see. Let me get my face off here so you see. Uh, so this is one of the most misunderstood part of case research. Now, in a normal survey, the normal survey, surveying things, you pick random people to get an average opinion, right? But in case study research, random selection is bad. You can't just do random selection. So instead, we use a term called theoretical sampling. So with theoretical sampling, we pick cases specifically because they are perfect example of what we want to study. You want to pick a case that is specific for your study, that is perfect for your study. So if you look at this diagram here, you see there are two main strategies for this theoretical sampling. Because you're sampling from what you want to study, we have the homogeneous sampling. And the homogeneous sampling is where we pick cases that are very similar. Like you can decide to pick a case of a large British corporation, and and to control for the outside world. So like, let me repeat. Homogeneous sampling, you know the term homogeneous, right? We pick cases that are very similar, like only large British organizations, and this helps you control for outside noise. So you want to pick cases that are very similar to each other, and it can be maybe tech startups in Silicon Valley, you know. And the idea is to control for the outside noise. So number two is polar type sampling. So this is actually my favorite. So we pick the extreme extreme cases. Now, I want you to imagine you want to know what makes a company successful. You want to understand what makes a company successful. So, uh, you don't pick you don't pick 10 average companies. You pick one massive successful company and one total failure. So you pick one big successful company and you pick another company that is a total failure. Now, by comparing the extremes, the causes of success becomes transparent and observable. So these are two ways you can do your homogeneous sampling. So we are not trying to statistically represent. We aren't trying to be statistically representative. We are trying we are trying to replicate a logic. So that is the whole idea here. So going to slide 6, we need to go fast because these slides are very long. So let me remove my hands on face. So assembling the toolkit. So assembling the toolkit. So that's the name of the slide. So now we need to gather our toolkit, which is very possible, the tools that we need. So step 3 is more like okay, yeah, this is step 3. And chill. Step 3, step 2. Yeah, step 2 is the selecting cases, and step 3 is assembling the toolkits. I want to make sure that yeah. So step 3 is crafting instruments and protocol, which are your toolkits. So we want to use triangulation, triangulation going over the different data we have. And I want you to think of this like a GPS satellites. I want you to think of this. What is the best example? Okay, let's use the GPS satellite. I want you to think of this like a GPS, as just like the GPS satellite needs multiple angles to pinpoint your locations accurately. Now, in research, we need to use multiple methods to pinpoint the truth, right? So now, what do you do? Combine method. So to triangulate better, we mix uh, qualitative data, that is stories, interviews, and observations, with quantitative data, that is archive, survey, and hard numbers. So why this? Now I think because this creates a synergy. So the number keeps us honest and stop off the number, that is the quantitative data, keeps us honest and stop us from being carried away by dramatic stories, right? So the stories explain why behind the numbers. I wish you can ask questions because I want you to understand this, but for some reason, just ask the questions in the comment section. So the next step is a multiple investigator. Now we also use a team of researchers. Now if I'm a researcher and I go alone, I might only see what I want to see, and I think that is positionality. I might only see what I want to see, but if I have a partner, they might see something totally different. So this is more like a convergent perspective, which gives us more higher confidence in our finding. So you need to go with somebody to to find more convergence so there can be more convergence in your findings. So let's get to the next one. I see why I say this paper is interesting, but a little bit packed. So building and inspecting, one case in at the other. So step 4 and 5, which is building and inspecting. Now we are now entering. So here we are entering the field. Step 4 and 5, and step 4 and 5 happens almost at the same time. Unlike the survey method, where you collect all data first and analyze them, here we kind of like overlap overlap data and analysis. So step 4 is entering the field. Now, to explain this better, to explain it better, this step means that you lock don't mean it doesn't mean that you lock yourself into a rigid script when collecting your data. Instead of asking the same fixed question, I lost my chain of thought. Now, instead of asking the same fixed question, no no matter what you hear, so let me think of an example. Let's say you're asking a question, and you don't just keep on asking the same fixed question. Even if the person that you're interviewing says something, you ignore what they say, then you keep on asking the question that you want to ask. That is not it. Now, what I'm trying to say that you listen carefully and think while you are collecting the data. Adjust your questions as new interesting things come up. Now, a simple example, imagine you are interviewing a CEO and you go with your prepared script and questions, and during the conversation, the CEO casually mentions a new strategy, maybe a new strategy they use in AI, and you never expected this strategy. So in this approach, you don't just ignore the strategy the CEO mentioned. You don't wait until the study is over, but you immediately add questions about it to your next interview. So probably when you're interviewing the next person, you add the questions. So the idea is that the very next person, so the very next person you talk to, you can say things like, someone mentioned this new strategy. Have you seen it before? Have you had it before? So what controlled opportunism means, like opportunism here, you follow the lead when they appear, and for the control part, you are still guided by your research goal, not just chasing random ideas. You are curious but not careless, so that is control opportunism. So the other one is within case analysis. So within case analysis, before comparing different companies, you first study each company on their own. So the idea is not to rush and say, company A is like company B. Instead, you want to ask what is really going on inside this one company. So you want to know what is going on in the individual companies. So what this means in practice is, for each company, you read all your notes, you review interviews, documents, and you review all interviews, documents, and observation. Look at the pattern within that single company. You treat each company as its own world with its own logic, history, and problem. The write-ups, then what they really are. So you then write a detailed story for each company, not a summary, not a bullet point, a story that explains who the company is, what this company is trying to do, what happened, why they unfolded the way they did. So if someone just read one write-up, that they should understand that company deeply, even without seeing others. So this step matters, because if you skip this step and jump into straight comparison, you miss the important details. You oversimplify and you force similarities, which I don't think is good. So going on slide 8, oh god, my handsome face. So going on slide 8, so I call this slide the skyline view. So comparing different building shape and data sources. So now we zoom out to the skyline view. We need to zoom out, and this is like step C. It's like searching for cross case pattern. So this is the heart of the theory building, the very heart of the theory building. But here is the problem. Humans are naturally bad at processing complex data, because we jump to conclusion based on our first impression or the most vivid story that we find. So to fight this bias, use specific tactics to actually force us to look deeper. So first of all, I think what the paper is trying to say that you start by selecting categories. We look for similarities within a group. For example, do all high performers or do all high performing companies treat their employees the same way? Then number two, you select pairs, right? We pick two cases and list every similarities and every difference, you know. So this actually forces us to see the subtle pattern we might miss. Now, the next thing is we might divide by source. We check if the interview data tells the same story as the questionnaire data. So we are looking for similar structures across different cases. That is what uh, this slide is trying to tell us. So it's nine. So so by I call this the refining the design. You're trying to shape your hypothesis. So by now, a shape is more or less emerging from the entire chaos, right? And okay, a shape is emerging from the entire chaos. Now, step seven is shaping your hypothesis. Now we are cycling between our data and our new theory to do two things. Two things. Now we want to sharpen the constructs, right? We want to sharpen our constructs, the constructs that we created before. So we refine our definition. We use evidences to measure exactly what we mean. So if we say high conflict, what does it look like? Is it yelling? Is it silence? We define it by using our data. Mm? Now, the next step is verifying relationships, right? Now, here we treat each case is like a separate experiment. This is called replication logic. So we ask ourselves, does the relationship hold in case A? Yes. Does it replicate in case B? Yes. If it fails in case C, why? So this process builds on internal validity, proving that our theory is actually true for cases we study. So for this slide, so we this is slide 8, right? This is slide 10. So here this slide, what is this slide talking about? In practice, okay, here a table of this is a table of a firm's name, power score, decision style and code. So what what does this whole thing look like in practice? Let's look at this table. This is a real example from Eisenhardt's work on CEO power centralization. So she said, how do you prove a CEO has centralized power? And you don't just guess, you build a table of evidence. And we are seeing quantitative score. You look at the CEO power score, and you're seeing 96 out of 10. So that's a hard number from a survey, right? We are saying. So we look at the qualitative score, look at the description, and we're seeing authoritarian. You look at the raw quotes, you know. For example, Joe of chairman is the decision maker. He has the whole show. So by stacking the numbers, the description, and the quote together, we have a rock solid proof that this concept is real. This is how you sharpen a construct. This is how you sharpen a construct. So we need to. This thing is getting too long. So the step eight, setting the structure in each neighbor. So by now we have a theory now. So where does this where does where does where does it fit in the neighborhood? Uh, Step 8 is more or less unfolding literature. We must compare our new theory with what other researchers have already written. Now, let's think about conflicting literature. What if our finding contradicts the experts? What act that's well, if our finding contradicts the expert, that's I think that's a great thing because it kind of like forces us to explain why there's a difference. So it often lead to the most creative frame breaking insights. Now, again, what if similar literature, what if our finding match what others found in a totally different industry? So I think this is a good thing because it increases our confidence that our theory can be generalized, not just a fluke. So this step raises the theoretical level of our work. Then going to three, knowing when the building is complete, reaching closure. Now, when when the building is finished, that's your theory. When you've reached your closure, how do you know now? How do we know when to stop adding cases? How we okay, I've lost my chain of thought. We stop adding cases. We know that our theory is complete when we have theoretical saturation, right? Theoretical saturation when all the new data we find doesn't really make sense, doesn't fit. So if you look at the graph, at the beginning, every case teaches you something. Every case teaches you something. The beginning of this graph till we reach a point of theoretical saturation. The learning curve is steep. Here the learning curve is steep. There's no longer new thing from the theory, but eventually the curve flattens. You analyze new cases, and you say, "I have seen this before. I have seen this before," and the marginal improvement is minimal. That is when you stop. So pragmatically, this usually happen between 4 to 10 cases. Now, fewer than 4 cases, it is hard to generate a complex theory to to prove that you aren't looking at a coincidence. So more than 10 cases, you'll be drawn in a data and it becomes too complex to manage. So if it's more than 10 cases, you'll be like drown in the data and it might become very complex to manage. So theoretical saturation should be, I mean, something like more than 4. You get, if you have 5 6 cases, then you know that you're almost that point. You can say, okay, I no longer need any more data. So an honest assessment. So now, no design is perfect. Let's honestly assess this approach. Now the strength, novelty, because we look at conflicting the strength. Novelty, because we look at conflicting realities. We don't start with bias, and we tend to generate a brand new frame breaking idea. Now, testable, because we measure everything carefully as we went, our theory is ready to be tested by others. Then, validity, it reflects reality because it is built from reality, not just a thought in an office. So, the weakness, overly complex. We can end up with a theory that tries to explain everything, resulting in a giant, messy diagram, narrow or idiosyncratic theory. We might build a theory that might work perfect for a specific company we studied, but too narrow to apply to the rest of the world. So, is it a good theory? The final inspection. So, so, how do we pass the final inspection? We judge the final result on 3 criteria. How do we know that our theory is good? One, it has to be parsimonious. The result. Is the theory simple, elegant? We want the simplest explanation possible, not a mess of lines. Is it testable? Does it generate clear propositions that can be proven false? If if it, if you can if you can't get to test it, it's not science. Logical coherent. Does it does the internal logic make sense to you? So, like you see, I have a short line. It says a strong theory building study present enough evidence for each construct and show the logic behind the relationship, allowing the reader to follow the entire analytical journey from the raw data to the final conclusion. So finally, to conclude Eisenhardt's framework transforms theory building from mysterious act into rigorous craft. By following this blueprint, from the cornerstone of the research question to the final inspection of the literature, we can construct theories that are not only novel and creative but only grounded in empirical evidence. We move from black box to a transparent, replicable, and valued scientific contribution. Thank you. Hope I did a great job in explaining.